Ethan entered the forest carrying a soldier's greatest burden, losing the mentor who once saved his life. Victor died completing a mission no one else dared finish, and now that responsibility rests on Ethan's shoulders. But when a silent figure begins stalking him through the trees, Ethan realizes this mission didn't end with Victor's death. It only began. What comes next will test his loyalty, his courage, and his faith. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God hides in the darkest places. The forest was cold and wet, its air heavy with the scent of moss and rain-soaked earth. Beneath the towering pines of rural Oregon, Ethan Cole stood alone before a grave that looked more like an afterthought than a final resting place. The soil was dark, freshly turned, still clinging to the edge of the crude wooden marker. No flag fluttered beside it, no folded triangle of honor, no Marines or SEALs in dress blues, no taps played in the distance, only silence and the quiet ache of something profoundly wrong. Ethan kept his hands in his pockets because he didn't know what else to do with them. The cold seeped through the seams of his uniform, but he barely felt it. His eyes stayed fixed on the name carved into the plank. Victor Hale, a man the world had forgotten long before he went into the ground. Rex, the German shepherd who had shadowed Ethan through more than one deployment, sat a short distance behind him. The dog wasn't restless or confused. He simply watched, as if he understood this wasn't a place for noise. Rex had known Victor too, knew the scent of the old man's lodge, the rhythm of his quiet laugh, the way he always knelt to scratch behind Rex's ears before saying anything to Ethan. Even dogs could feel the absence of someone who treated them like equals. Ethan let out a breath that clouded in the damp air. "They didn't even give you a flag," he murmured. His voice wavered more than he wanted. He swallowed hard. Not even that. Victor Hale had once been a man other soldiers whispered about, sometimes in admiration, sometimes in discomfort. A sniper who moved like a rumor through the trees, a mentor who taught Ethan lessons that didn't appear in any manual. But Victor had also been a man burdened by decisions that carved deep marks into him, the sort that made him withdraw from the world until only the forest remained, and because he refused to play politics, refused to bend truth into something more convenient, the system erased him quietly, efficiently. Now Ethan was the only one standing at his grave, and that made rage burn beneath his calm exterior. He crouched down, brushing aside needles that the wind had blown onto the fresh mound. His fingers pressed into the damp soil, not in prayer, but in promise. "You deserved better," he whispered, "but I'll carry what you gave me. I won't let them bury your name with you." The forest answered with nothing more than a distant crow. Ethan rose slowly, the tightness in his chest refusing to ease. Rex trotted beside him as he made his way toward Victor's old cabin deeper in the woods. The trail was familiar. Ethan had walked it countless times as a younger man, usually after messing up some drill or losing patience during training. Victor never yelled. He simply waited for Ethan to come back with clearer eyes. Ethan realized now how rare that kind of patience had been. The cabin appeared through the fog like a memory materializing. The wooden walls were damp, the porch sagging with age, the windows fogged by time and disuse. Inside, the air smelled faintly of pine resin, old gun oil, and the faint ember of a life spent in silence. Victor's belongings were few: a cot, a stack of weather-beaten field journals, a small stove he'd insisted on fixing himself time and again. Ethan walked around the cabin not as an intruder, but as someone trying to memorize the remnants of a man who had shaped far more of him than anyone else ever had. Rex sniffed around before stopping at the desk in the corner, his ears tilted back, then forward again, as if urging Ethan to look. The dog nudged the leg of the table once. "What is it, buddy?" Ethan knelt beside him. Under a few loose papers and a worn-out compass lay a small wooden box. Ethan lifted it carefully. It had weight, but not enough to be full of tools or ammunition. The lid creaked when he opened it. Inside rested 3 items: an old Winchester Model 70, polished yet scarred from decades of hard use, a forest map with hand-drawn red markings, circles, arrows, and trails that didn't appear on any official chart, a sealed envelope with Ethan's name written in Victor's tight, practiced handwriting. Ethan's throat tightened. He set the rifle down gently beside the box and opened the envelope. "Ethan, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. Maybe the forest finally claimed me, or maybe someone decided I'd lived long enough. Either way, this isn't a burden. I'm giving you a choice. There is something in these woods, something unfinished. I meant to stop it, but time and illness caught up quicker than I expected. Someone has to see this through. Someone who listens more than he speaks. Someone who can walk these woods without losing himself. That someone is you. Take the rifle. Follow the map. The things I couldn't finish, they're yours now. For what it's worth, I never doubted you. Not once." Victor Ethan held the letter for a long moment. He felt a sting rise in his eyes, but he forced it down. He had promised himself he wouldn't break. Not here, not now. But Victor's words landed with the weight of a final order, one given not from authority but from trust. He folded the letter and placed it back in the box. "So this is it, huh?" he said softly. "Your last mission is now mine." Rex nudged Ethan's arm with his nose, sensing the shift in him. The dog didn't know the details, but he understood when Ethan accepted a fight. His posture stiffened with quiet loyalty. Ethan took one last look around Victor's cabin. The weathered logs, the dust-covered journals, the window that faced the northern tree line where Victor always claimed the wind carried secrets. There was something haunting and comforting in the stillness. Victor had lived and died with the forest as his only witness. Ethan took the rifle, slung it across his shoulder, and stepped outside with Rex close behind. Rain began to fall, steady and cold. But for the first time since he'd arrived, Ethan felt a direction forming inside him. The grief hadn't lessened, but purpose had woven itself through the ache. He didn't know what the red marks on the map meant. He didn't know what danger Victor had been tracking. He only knew one thing. His mentor had died in silence, but Ethan would walk loudly enough for both of them. He stared once more at the grave between the pines, then finally turned away. The forest swallowed them as they left the cabin behind. The morning light filtered weakly through the dense canopy as Ethan Cole followed the forest trail deeper into Washington's wilderness, Rex walking close to his side with a quiet purpose that matched his own. The air was colder here, thinner, filled with the scent of cedar and distant streams. Ethan moved with steady determination, the wooden box packed carefully in his rucksack, the old Winchester hanging across his back. Victor's map had led him north through days of uneven terrain, narrow valleys, and forgotten logging paths that only someone who lived half a lifetime in the woods would have marked. Ethan didn't complain or hesitate. He had spent years following orders from men he didn't respect. Following the last request of the only mentor he had ever fully trusted felt different, almost sacred. Several miles in, the trail narrowed between high ferns and fallen branches, leading him to a clearing that held nothing but stillness, until Rex suddenly stopped. The dog didn't bark or growl. Instead, he lowered his head slightly, every sense sharpening. Rex had learned long ago that danger in the forest didn't arrive with loud signals. Most threats came quietly, the kind that required a soldier and a dog to understand each other without a word. Ethan placed a hand on Rex's neck in quiet acknowledgement. "You smell it too," he whispered. The map showed the training camp close, hidden somewhere ahead. Victor once said the entrance to that camp was designed so only those who were meant to find it could. The path curved heavily uphill before ending at what looked like an unremarkable cliffside. Moss-covered rock, a few saplings, nothing more. But something felt off. Too still, too ordinary. Victor hated ordinary. Ethan crouched, brushing his fingers across the earth. The soil was slightly disturbed, compressed in a straight line hidden beneath a layer of pine needles. A false trail designed for trained eyes. He pushed aside branches, revealing a narrow walkway descending between two boulders. Rex followed without hesitation. The air cooled further as they advanced down the concealed path. At the bottom, they reached a deep ravine crossed by a single fallen log. On the other side of it stood a perimeter of pylons, steel disguised as rotting wood. Beyond that was the camp Victor had mentioned, a cluster of low structures made from salvaged timber, camouflage nets, and natural foliage so expertly arranged that anyone outside the perimeter would walk right past without realizing humans were living there. As Ethan approached, a voice barked sharply from the watch post above, "Identify yourself." Ethan stepped forward, lifting his chin toward the shadowed platform. "Petty Officer Ethan Cole, United States Navy, reporting for evaluation." A figure emerged from the platform, sliding down a rope with practiced ease. The man landing before Ethan was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the kind of precision that came from decades of disciplined service. Though age lined parts of his face, there was nothing soft about him. This was a man shaped by deployments, betrayals, victories, and the long list of losses that military life carved into those who endured it. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Mark Devereaux," he said. His voice carried the kind of authority that didn't need to be raised to be respected. "I served with Victor Hale years ago." Ethan stiffened. Anyone connected to Victor deserved respect. Devereaux studied him for a long moment, his stance, the rifle, Rex. His gaze lingered briefly on the Winchester. Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. Then he nodded, just once. "So Victor's final letter found the right hands." Before Ethan could answer, movement emerged from deeper in the camp. A group of Navy SEAL snipers, their gear concealed in forest tones, stepping out with smug expressions. They weren't hostile, merely amused in the way elite soldiers behave when they smell weakness. One of them, a younger man with quick, cocky steps, pointed at Ethan's rifle and let out a laugh. "You're kiddin'. You hauled that antique all the way here? What's next, flintlock pistols?" Another chimed in immediately. "Maybe he's here for squirrel hunting season." Laughter followed, not cruel, but dismissive. Ethan remained still. Years of deployments had taught him which insults deserved attention and which didn't. These didn't. He reached down and touched Rex's back. The dog remained calm but alert, his eyes fixed on the group in a way that made a few of them shift uncomfortably under his gaze. Devereaux's voice cut through their noise. "Enough. You'll have your chance to see whether he belongs here. For now, let him breathe." The snipers fell silent, though the smirks remained. Ethan met none of their eyes. He kept his focus on Devereaux. "I came because Victor said there was something unfinished," Ethan said quietly. "If this place is where it starts, then I'm ready." Devereaux's expression hardened into something reflective, almost burdened. Victor was tracking something in these woods, something he told no one about except me, and now you. But before we get to that, you'll undergo the same trials the others did. No special treatment. Ethan nodded firmly. "Wouldn't ask for any." "Good," Devereaux said. "Then your evaluation begins at dusk. The forest will decide if you can stay." Ethan felt Rex lean slightly against his leg, not out of fear, but readiness. The dog sensed the shift in the air, the coming challenge. The camp around them murmured with small movements, a knife being sharpened, gear being checked, boots being laced tighter. Soldiers prepared for trials not designed for comfort. As Devereaux began walking back toward the main structure, he paused, glancing over his shoulder. "One more thing, Cole." Ethan looked up. "Whatever Victor sent you here to finish, the others don't know about it yet. But when they do, the forest won't be your only concern." Ethan didn't respond. Inside him, something tightened, a knot of anticipation and unease. Rex snarled softly just once, as if sensing that what lay ahead was far more dangerous than a standard evaluation. And somewhere beyond the camp, deeper in the woods where the map's red markings began, a faint echo rippled through the trees. Not a sound, more like a shift in the air, as if something had been waiting for Ethan to arrive. Twilight settled unevenly across the forest, as a muted bluish haze wrapped itself around the trunks and undergrowth. The camp grew quieter as the daylight thinned, every soldier instinctively lowering their voice as if the forest itself demanded respect. Ethan Cole stood near the central fire pit, the Winchester at his back, Rex sitting beside him, with that steady, calm awareness only a battle-hardened dog possessed. As darkness crept closer, the evaluation began. Lieutenant Colonel Devereaux emerged from the main structure, holding a weathered clipboard and a small lantern. Its faint glow outlined the tension around him, a tension that did not rise from fear, but expectation. "Tonight," he said, "your first trial will test 3 things: tracking, silent movement, and control under pressure." His gaze swept across the group. "There will be no guidance, only the forest, and the mistakes you choose not to make." A few SEALs shifted their weight. They had completed this trial once, but none took it lightly. Even the cocky ones understood the forest wasn't impressed by rank or swagger. It swallowed the unprepared without hesitation. Devereaux approached Ethan. "Cole, step forward." Ethan obeyed, shoulders square. Rex stood, too, ready without being told. Devereaux eyed the dog for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "Victor always said this dog had instincts sharper than most men. We'll see how true that is." One of the SEALs muttered behind Ethan, "Maybe the mutt will do the trial for him." A couple of men chuckled under their breath. Rex didn't react, but Ethan saw the slight tightening of the dog's posture, the same shift he made right before pouncing on a threat. Ethan placed a hand on Rex's shoulder, grounding him. "Easy, partner." Devereaux raised his lantern, signaling silence. Listen carefully. 1 mile north, there's an old ranger station. It hasn't been used in years, but still stands. Somewhere between here and that station, we've placed 3 markers. They're small, quiet, hard to find, and every marker is guarded by environmental triggers, noise traps, scent diversions, misleading tracks. Your task, reach the station and retrieve the 3 markers. If you hit a noise trap, the trial ends. A long, tight pause followed. Then Devereaux added, "And you'll do this alone? Only your wits and the forest." Ethan glanced down at Rex. "Alone means without him?" "Your dog stays," Devereaux confirmed. "This is your evaluation." It was the first line Ethan didn't agree with. Rex had always been his second set of instincts, the mind that sensed what he missed. Taking on a silent movement trial without him felt like removing half his awareness. But Ethan didn't argue. Victor had taught him to survive with or without a partner. He knelt beside Rex and cupped the dog's face. "Stay with them. If I'm not back by dawn, bite someone who deserves it." The dog huffed through his nose as if understanding the humor, then settled beside the fire pit, eyes fixed on Ethan with unwavering focus. Devereaux led Ethan to the camp's outer boundary, a thin line of stakes marking where the evaluation officially began. The shadows between the trees seemed to breathe. Ethan inhaled deeply, letting the forest scent fill him. Wet bark, cold soil, and a faint metallic tang hanging in the air like the echo of something that had happened earlier in the day. Devereaux lowered his lantern. "Begin." Ethan stepped forward, swallowed by the dark. The forest at night was not the same place it had been at dusk. Every sound carried meaning. Every broken twig could betray him. Each patch of brush could hide a trap or something less forgiving. Ethan moved slowly, barely disturbing the ground. Victor had taught him that silence wasn't about taking gentle steps. It was about stepping where the forest allowed you to. Ethan placed his feet where the soil felt dense and unmoving, avoiding dry leaves and hollow roots. Half a mile in, he stopped. Something faint brushed against his perception, a subtle inconsistency in the air. Victor once said that traps weren't seen first. They were felt as disruptions in the forest's rhythm. Ethan crouched and caught the reflection of a thin wire between 2 shrubs. A shallow pit crouched beside it, lined with broken branches designed to snap loudly if triggered. He disarmed the wire carefully and moved on. The deeper he traveled, the more the forest revealed its unease. The quiet wasn't a peaceful stillness. It felt as though the trees were waiting, watching, wondering. Ethan's instincts prickled. He paused again, scanning the ground. A set of footprints appeared, leading toward the north. Too clean, too deliberate, a lure. He circled wide around it and found the first marker tucked behind a moss-covered stump, its metallic surface cold to the touch. 1 down, 2 to go. Another 15 minutes passed before he encountered the second trap, an arrangement of stones above a narrow path. A simple step would dislodge them, creating a noise impossible to ignore. He slipped under the stones, flattening his body like a shadow and sliding across the damp earth. The second marker lay hidden under a pile of pine needles. 2 down. But the third marker remained missing, and the forest grew darker still. The old ranger station finally came into view through the trees, silhouetted against a rising fog. But something was wrong. Ethan slowed. The air felt heavier here, as if someone had been moving through this area recently, someone not part of the evaluation. He scanned the ground. No military boot prints, no training markers, only deep impressions from a different kind of boot, the pattern strange, almost improvised. Ethan's pulse sharpened. Victor had hinted in his letter that danger had begun drifting through these woods long before he died. Tracks like these could have belonged to the people Victor feared. A twig snapped behind him, not a random sound, intentional, observant. Ethan lowered his breathing, hiding his presence, and edged toward the last marker, which he finally spotted wedged beneath the ranger station's front steps. He reached for it slowly, knowing he was no longer alone. When he straightened, something flickered at the edge of his vision, movement dissolving into the darkness too fast for a clear look. Human, not animal, watching him, testing him. The forest held its breath. Ethan held his ground, eyes narrowed. Whoever was out there didn't step closer. They simply retreated into the night as silently as they'd arrived. Ethan pocketed the final marker, his jaw tightening. The trial wasn't just a test of his skills anymore. Someone else was using it as a chance to measure him. And whatever was waiting deeper in the woods had already begun paying attention. Night settled fully over the forest by the time Ethan Cole returned to the training camp, the 3 markers tucked securely inside his pocket. The lights around the camp were dim, designed to blend with the shadows rather than pierce them, but they were bright enough for Ethan to see the subtle shift in posture from the other SEALs as he stepped back through the perimeter. For the first time since arriving, no one laughed at the Winchester on his shoulder. No one joked about squirrels. There was an unspoken understanding in their silence. Whatever trial he had just faced, he had returned from it unchanged on the outside, but something in his eyes had hardened. Rex ran to him immediately, pressing against his leg with a low, relieved whine. Ethan knelt briefly, resting a hand on the dog's neck. "I'm good," he whispered, "but there's something out there." Rex stiffened at the tone, not the words. The dog didn't need details. He recognized the tension in Ethan's voice, the slight tremor of adrenaline that hadn't completely faded. Lieutenant Colonel Devereaux awaited him at the fire pit, the flames reduced to low embers. He gave Ethan a long, measuring look. 3 markers? Ethan placed them in the colonel's hand. All intact. Devereaux turned them over slowly, then flicked his eyes back up. "I heard no alarms, no traps triggered. That's a rare outcome." "I had good teachers," Ethan said quietly. "Victor would have said the same thing." Devereaux's expression softened for a brief second, then hardened again. "But you didn't just find markers out there. You found something else." Ethan stared into the embers. Someone was watching me. The surrounding SEALs straightened. Even the cocky ones turned serious. Devereaux exhaled slowly. "Describe them." "I can't," Ethan said. "I didn't get a clean look, but they moved like they didn't want to be seen, not like wildlife, and definitely not like rookies." The colonel folded his arms. "Victor believed someone was using this forest as a corridor. Smugglers, ex-contractors, maybe rogue survivalists. Take your pick. He tried warning certain people. They ignored him. I didn't." One SEAL spoke from the shadows. His voice carried a hint of cynicism, but also unease. "If someone's out there, why haven't they come for us?" Ethan answered before Devereaux could. "Maybe they don't see us as threats yet." The colonel nodded. "Exactly." The fire popped, throwing sparks skyward. For a moment, no one spoke. The forest pressed against the camp's perimeter with heavy silence, as though eavesdropping. Devereaux finally broke the tension. "Cole, follow me." They walked away from the camp, Rex trailing close behind. A few minutes later, they arrived at a small shed built from rough planks. Inside was a large wooden table cluttered with maps, field journals, and an old radio that crackled occasionally with static. Devereaux placed his hand on a faded map pinned against the wall. Victor spent years tracking patterns in these woods. Strange fires, missing hikers, carcasses that didn't look like animal kills, trails deliberately wiped. Ethan examined the red circles Victor had drawn on the map. Same markings as the map he left me. Because he was close to finding something, Devereaux said. Too close, his health was failing, but that didn't stop him. What he couldn't finish, he wanted you to. Ethan swallowed a knot forming in his throat. Did he tell you what he thought was out there? Devereaux shook his head. Only that it was organized, intelligent, and moving deeper into federal land. Ethan studied the map again. The tracks I saw tonight, they didn't look like standard boots. No, Devereaux said grimly. They wouldn't. Rex growled, low, warning, aimed at the open door. Ethan's hand instinctively went to the Winchester on his shoulder. Two seals approached the shed. Both stopped when they saw Rex's raised hackles. "We're not here to start anything," one said, lifting his hands. "Colonel told us to check in." Devereaux gestured for them to enter. "At ease." The taller seal stepped inside. He was lean, with a composed demeanor shaped by missions that left marks invisible to the eye. "Sir, we finished checking the perimeter. Nothing out of place. But—" He hesitated. "But what?" Devereaux pressed. The soldier removed a small object from his pocket and placed it on the table. A spent casing, unmarked, scratched, and hand-loaded. "We found this lodged in a tree." The seal pointed toward the northern tree line. "Fresh. Within the hour." Ethan lifted the casing. It was warm. Devereaux looked at Ethan. "Whatever watched you tonight wasn't just observing, they were testing their range." The colonel dismissed the two seals and closed the door behind them. He leaned heavily against the table. "I wanted time to train you all before this started, but it seems our visitors aren't interested in waiting." Ethan's jaw tightened. "So what now?" Devereaux straightened. "Tomorrow, the second evaluation begins, a team trial in the deeper regions, 3 miles out, past the river. Normally, it's just a navigation and stealth assessment." "But now?" Ethan asked. "Now," Devereaux said, "it's reconnaissance." His voice dropped lower. "Victor believed the deeper you go, the more the forest reveals. But it also hides things you might wish you hadn't seen." Ethan felt the weight of the Winchester on his shoulder. He thought of Victor's letter, his final line written in shaking pen strokes. Someone must finish this. Rex nudged Ethan's hand, sensing the unease thickening in him. Devereaux moved toward the door, but paused. "Cole, before dawn I want you to get some sleep. You'll need it." Ethan frowned. "For the trial?" "No." Devereaux looked toward the black tree line where something unseen waited with patient interest. "For whatever's out there watching us right now?" A cold wind slipped through the doorframe. Ethan turned reflexively, just in time to see a distant silhouette withdraw into the dark, silent and fluid. Not a ghost, not an animal. Someone who knew the forest as well as Victor once did, and someone who wanted Ethan to follow. Dawn crawled across the forest in a muted gray, as if the sun was reluctant to rise over the land that had spent the night holding its breath. Mist clung to every branch, settling like a second skin over the camp. Ethan Cole woke before the others, his mind still tangled with the memory of the silent silhouette disappearing into the tree line hours earlier. Rex lay beside him, already awake, eyes fixed toward the north as though expecting that figure to return. By the time the rest of the SEALs emerged from their tents, Lieutenant Colonel Devereaux was already standing near the central clearing with a map tucked under one arm. "Listen up," he called out, his voice steady, but warned by a kind of urgency that had not been there on previous mornings. "Today's evaluation will take you 3 miles beyond the river. Navigation, stealth, and situational adaptability." Several men exchanged looks. Every SEAL knew those were standard requirements. But Devereaux's tone made it clear nothing about this particular assignment was routine. Ethan stepped forward with the others, Rex at his side. Devereaux eyed the dog thoughtfully. "Cole, for this trial, your partner goes with you." That caught attention. A few of the snipers whispered among themselves. Allowing a dog into a navigation assessment was highly unusual. Ethan knelt beside Rex, brushing a hand across the dog's fur. "Ready to work?" Rex responded with a low breath and sharpened posture. Devereaux unfolded the map, pinning it between his palms. "Your team will be 5, Cole and his dog, plus 2 of our snipers, Garrison and Locke, and 1 observer." He nodded toward a figure standing at the edge of the clearing. The observer stepped forward, a woman with quiet steps and a calm that felt more deliberate than natural. Not young, not old. Simply someone who carried experience the way others carried weapons. She introduced herself with a simple, level voice. "I'm Mara Quinn. I monitor performance and psychological cohesion. Don't think of me as part of your team, but don't forget, I'm watching." Her presence was not hostile, but it carried a distance that suggested she had seen many evaluations before, and many failures. Locke and Garrison approached next. Both were good soldiers, but very different men. Garrison moved with the confident ease of someone who had spent a decade on the teams and knew how to read terrain like a second language. Locke didn't carry the same confidence. There was tension in him, something tightly wound and unresolved, the kind that often came from a mistake in the field that never fully healed. But both men nodded respectfully at Ethan. Devereaux spoke again. "Your goal is to reach the observation ridge, retrieve the packet hidden there, and return by nightfall. Normally the route is straightforward. Today," he hesitated, "you stay together. No one wanders off. If anything feels wrong, it probably is." Ethan met the colonel's eyes. The meaning behind the last line was not lost on either of them. The team moved out. The forest changed character once they crossed the river. The air grew colder, the terrain steeper. The canopy thickened overhead, choking out much of the daylight. Underbrush tangled their legs, and fallen branches forced them to move slower and more deliberately. Garrison led the group, compass in hand, while Locke scanned their flanks. Mara walked silently in the center, her eyes flicking not at the trees but at the men, cataloging their reactions. Ethan moved near the rear with Rex, letting the dog interpret the scents and sounds ahead. 2 miles in, Rex froze. The dog's body stiffened, not the alertness of noticing something small, but the deeper tension that meant danger. Ethan raised his fist silently. The group halted. Garrison whispered, "What's he got?" "Not sure yet," Ethan murmured. Rex's gaze locked on a cluster of trees to the east. Ethan listened. At first, he heard nothing. Then, faintly, something brushed the earth. Not footsteps, more like a weight shifting deliberately. Locke quietly unslung his rifle. Mara Quinn observed Rex with analytical calm. "He's tracking something," she said. Ethan nodded. "Something that's aware of us." They waited. The forest did not continue the sound. It swallowed it. Garrison whispered, "Whatever it was, it moved away." "No," Ethan said softly. "It's waiting." The group advanced carefully, each step deliberate. Rex's tension remained, but he followed orders, staying close. They reached a narrow ravine that sliced through the forest like a wound. Garrison pointed across. "Observation ridge is on the other side." A fallen tree formed a rough bridge over the ravine. Locke muttered, "I hate these crossings." Ethan studied the ravine. Something about the emptiness below felt wrong, too still, too silent, as if the forest avoided making sound where the earth had once been disturbed violently. Before he could speak, Rex growled, not loudly, deadly. Ethan spun. Something moved behind them, a flicker of motion cutting through the mist between the trunks. A human silhouette, watching again. Locke lifted his rifle. "Who's out there?" No answer. Garrison stepped forward. "Identify yourself." Still nothing. The figure disappeared behind a tree. Ethan's blood chilled. It was the same movement he'd seen near the ranger station, precisely the same, fluid, practiced, deliberate. Mara Quinn whispered, "That wasn't part of the evaluation." Before anyone could respond, the forest shook with a sudden, distant crack. Wood splintering violently, a tree had fallen somewhere deeper in the valley. Garrison swore. That wasn't wind, that was cut. Locke stared across the ravine. "Colonel said someone's been moving through these woods. Maybe they're marking something." Ethan's mind raced. If someone was cutting trees intentionally, it wasn't random. It was directed, coordinated, maybe even strategic. Mara spoke softly, but with certainty. "We proceed, but slowly." They crossed the fallen log bridge one by one. Rex went first, Ethan guiding him, then Locke, then Mara. When Garrison took his first steps, a crow exploded from the branches overhead, screeching in a sharp spiral. Everyone ducked reflexively, but Ethan caught the truth immediately. "That wasn't a crow starting the noise," he murmured. "Something scared it." Another presence, another watcher. They reached the other side, but Ethan felt the forest's pressure tightening around them, the sense that someone unseen was corralling them, probing their reactions, testing their path. Finally, the ridge came into view, a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley. The packet was hidden beneath a slab of stone right where Devereaux said it would be. But as Garrison reached for it, Rex suddenly snarled and lunged toward the tree line. Ethan grabbed his harness, stopping him, but the dog wasn't reacting to an animal. He was reacting to a person. A figure stood at the ridge's edge, partially veiled by mist. Not approaching, not fleeing, waiting. Ethan locked eyes with him for a single, brief moment, and the stranger raised one hand, not in threat, but in invitation. Then he vanished into the trees. Ethan stood completely still. Mara stepped beside him. Her voice was low. "You know what that was." Ethan swallowed. "Someone Victor was tracking." "And now," Mara said, "they're tracking you." The forest exhaled around them, as if acknowledging the truth. Whatever hunted Victor Hale had just chosen Ethan as its next target. A muted stillness clung to the ridge as the team gathered the packet from beneath the cold slab of stone. The forest, usually alive with rustling leaves and distant bird calls, had fallen into an oppressive silence, as though the earth itself was listening. Ethan Cole felt Rex press close to his leg, muscles tense, breath sharp and measured. No fear, only readiness. The mysterious figure who had raised a silent hand toward Ethan just moments earlier was nowhere to be seen. Yet the impression of his gaze lingered like frost on the back of Ethan's neck. Garrison adjusted his grip on the packet. "We need to head back," he said, his voice low but firm. "And fast." He was trying to hide the tension in his tone, but it was impossible to disguise from men who lived on instinct. Locke scanned the tree line, his rifle angled upward. "He's still out there. I know he is. He's watching for a reaction." Mara Quinn took a slow step forward and studied the forest's edge where the figure had stood. "If he wanted to attack, he would have done it earlier," she said. "This is reconnaissance. He wanted us to see him." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Not us," he corrected. "Me." The unspoken truth settled between them. Victor Hale had been tracking someone in these woods before his death, and that someone had known Ethan would come, as if waiting for Victor's student to step into his place. They began their descent from the ridge. The forest canopy closed above them like the arch of a cathedral, swallowing daylight the deeper they went. Shadows stretched long across the ground, and every snapped twig felt like a deliberate test of their composure. Halfway back to the ravine bridge, Rex froze again. Ethan dropped to one knee beside him. "Talk to me," he whispered. Rex's ears tipped forward, then angled left. He wasn't confused. He had locked on to something. Ethan followed the dog's gaze and saw the faintest disturbance in the brush, the rhythm of breathing deliberately controlled, a skilled presence, patient, experienced, the watcher. Ethan signaled for silence and motioned the group into cover behind a fallen cedar. Garrison crouched beside him. "You see him?" "No," Ethan murmured, "but Rex does." Locke's breathing quickened. "Are we walking into an ambush?" Ethan shook his head. "If he wanted an ambush, he would have chosen the ravine or the old station. This is something else. He's tracking us, mapping us." Mara spoke quietly. "Testing your reactions." "Testing mine," Ethan repeated. The realization tasted bitter. "He wants to know if Victor taught me enough." They pushed forward, staying close. The forest seemed to shift around them, branches creaking as though something moved parallel to their path. Never too close, never too far. A presence that understood how to stay just beyond reach. When they reached the ravine, the fallen tree they had used as a bridge earlier was gone. Not rotted, not shifted by wind, removed. Only a clean stump remained. Garrison swore under his breath. "That's not natural. Someone cut it." Locke's voice cracked. "He trapped us." Ethan studied the ravine's depth, too far down to jump, too wide to clear. "This isn't a trap. It's a message." He pointed at the edges of the cut. "Clean blade, fresh. He did this after we crossed." Mara frowned. "To tell us he controls the route." Ethan's jaw clenched. "No, to tell me I'm on his path." Rex padded slowly to the edge, sniffing the air, then looked back at Ethan with a low rumble of warning. There was no fear in him, only a fierce readiness, a willingness to stand between Ethan and whatever stepped out of the trees. Garrison spotted something upstream. "There's another crossing, a natural stone arch. We'll use that." They circled left along the ravine until the stone formation came into view, an uneven, moss-covered natural bridge. Risky, but their only option. Locke tested the first step. Solid. Garrison followed. Mara crossed next without hesitation. Ethan was halfway across when Rex stopped abruptly. The dog stared back into the forest, body coiled like a spring. Ethan turned. The watcher stood on the other side of the ravine. This time, he didn't hide behind leaves or shadows. He stood fully exposed, the mist curling around him. Ethan still couldn't make out clear facial details, but the man's posture was unmistakable, controlled, alert, trained, not a wanderer, not a hermit, a soldier, a ghost from a war the government never admitted existed. The man tilted his head the slightest degree, observing Ethan the way predators assess one another. Then, slowly, almost respectfully, the stranger tapped 2 fingers against his chest, a gesture Ethan had seen once before, a signal Victor Hale used. Recognition slammed into Ethan like cold water. Mara whispered from behind him, "What does that mean?" Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was reeling. The watcher raised one hand and pointed toward the deeper forest, not toward camp, but toward the regions Victor had marked in desperate red strokes on his map. A warning? A challenge? Or an invitation? Then the stranger stepped back and vanished again into the pines. Ethan reached the other side of the stone bridge, pulse surging with something sharp, half dread, half certainty. Garrison grabbed his arm. "Cole, what the hell was that?" Ethan finally found his voice. "Someone Victor knew. Someone Victor chased. Someone who knows I'm supposed to finish what he started." Locke exhaled shakily. "And he wants you to follow him?" Ethan nodded once. "Yeah, but not yet. Not until we know what we're walking into." Mara studied Ethan with a calm, unreadable expression. "Then you need to tell Devereaux everything you saw." Ethan met her gaze. "I will." But inside, he knew the truth. There were things he couldn't explain. Yet, things he didn't understand enough to share. The man across the ravine wasn't just a threat. He was a missing chapter of Victor's life, a living shadow of the mentor Ethan had lost. And now he was watching Ethan with the same silent expectation Victor once had. As the team finally moved toward camp, Rex stayed close to Ethan's side. The dog glanced back into the fog again and again, not afraid, but anticipating the next step in a hunt that had only just begun. In the darkest corners of the Washington forest, when Ethan stood face to face with the silent figure that once haunted Victor Hale, he realized something profound. Not every battle is fought for victory. Some battles are fought to protect the faith inside us. Victor believed that God places us exactly where we need to be, even when we cannot understand the path or see the light ahead. And now Ethan began to see it too. The Lord doesn't always speak through thunder or miracles. Sometimes he speaks through a quiet instinct, a small sign, or a stranger who appears at the exact moment we need courage. God never promised that our journey would be easy, but he promised we would never walk it alone. And just like Ethan, we also face days filled with fear, loss, or confusion. Yet God still sends us small miracles, a friend who calls at the right moment, a family member who refuses to give up on us, or even the loyal companionship of a dog who stays by our side through everything. Ethan continued Victor's mission not because of duty alone, but because he believed that God had placed this unfinished path in front of him for a reason. And if you are watching this, perhaps God is reminding you too. Each of us has a purpose. Each of us carries a piece of a divine plan, whether it's protecting our loved ones, helping a stranger, or waking up every day with the strength to keep going. Miracles are not always loud. Sometimes a miracle is simply the strength to rise again. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's continue this journey of faith and courage together. May God bless you and your family with peace, protection, and hope, today and every day. Amen.